couldn't even satisfy him in bed.
We are talking about 2 Days in the Valley, a 1996 movie directed and written by John Herzfeld. Now, in the kind of mid-90s, we were introduced to the word Tarantino-esque. After the success of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, there was a slew of crime dramas that tried to ape the style of Tarantino, or at least inspired by. Maybe they had the witty and cutting dialogue, maybe they had the cool and stylish characters, or maybe they had some kind of trick with non-linear storytelling or something like that. And this was one of those films. Now, this film is notable for an absolutely stellar cast, including Charlize Theron's debut. This is her first movie. But you've also got, let's have a look, Eric Stoltz, you've got James Spader, you've got Danny Aiello, Jeff Daniels, you've got Terry Hatcher, to name but a few. Now, the story of this one, to be quite vague, because I don't want to go into spoilers in case you haven't seen it, because this film is one of those ones which I don't feel a lot of people have heard of or seen. But it involves a crime, a murder, which is committed by a couple of hitmen. And it focuses on the circumstances of this hit. And there are a few characters that are directly involved with this particular hit. And then we get a few other characters that end up kind of getting roped in from one way or another as the movie progresses. So we actually have all these kind of little individual storylines of different characters who end up kind of crossing paths to do with this kind of particular crime at one point in the movie. Now, it sounds somewhat generic, to be honest, because obviously I don't want to spoil too much in regards to the actual plot. Suffice to say, what makes this movie so enjoyable is some fantastic character work. So let's talk about it in what works and maybe what doesn't. The actual premise of, a murder, a crime investigation, or, a crime story isn't particularly new. And as I've said, after the success of Tarantino's early works, we get a lot of kind of imitators trying to kind of, if not ape, but certainly kind of adapt that sort of style. And that is true of this one. And that is maybe one of the things that you can say. But nonetheless, it really does work because we have a real cast of kooky and interesting characters. James Spader, for example, plays this cool as ice hitman who is all about professionalism. His partner, Danny Aiello, is a bit more of a kind of rough around the edges, maybe kind of past his heyday as his kind of other hitman. Then we've got the police, played by Eric Stoltz and Jeff Daniels, who are again somewhat of at odds. I don't want to go too much into details of why. Then we have this kind of very eccentric art dealer and his personal assistant. You've got his sister-in-law, who ends up kind of meeting this guy who's kind of suicidal and ex sort of screenwriter and things like this. And all these kind of people's lives will kind of intersect in one way or the other. Plus we have a few other kind of like minor characters as well. So we have some very, very kind of eccentric characters. As I've said, for example, this art dealer, massively kind of like a control freak. We've got two very diametrically opposed hitmen, two very diametrically opposed, police officers, and they're all played by very, very good actors. So we get great acting. We get some really nice sort of character work. I mean, it's not as strong as kind of Tarantino-esque dialogue, I would say, but nonetheless, we do get a good sense of kind of who these characters are. We get a couple of femme fatales, and obviously with Charlize Theron's, as I said, her screen debut here, and she plays Helga, who is this kind of the girlfriend of James Spader's character, and she is like, trust me, in this movie, if you've ever thought Charlize Theron was sexy and have not seen this movie, this one will absolutely blow your mind. Think Margot Robbie in The Wolf of Wall Street, this is the kind of Charlize Theron's equivalent of that. There's also a great cat fight with her and kind of Terry Hatcher in kind of around the middle of the movie as well. The actual story itself is, like I've said, it involves different characters, but it is told in a kind of a linear way. So it is fairly kind of easy to kind of follow, don't get too lost. But there are still a couple of kind of twists and turns here as well. The movie also has some kind of quite fun little kind of, not jokes exactly, but kind of fun dialogue and some more kind of humorous kind of situations. And the characters just kind of err on the, it's slightly absurd sometimes. So it's not quite the kind of the gritty kind of realistic kind of crime drama, I would say. But nonetheless, there are some kind of like still kind of fun sort of character moments there. We do get a couple of kind of shootout scenes. There was a little tinge of kind of action and stuff that's displayed here, and the movie kind of asks moral questions of the audience about what would you do and things like this. So overall, this is a pretty good movie, I would say. Is there anything that I can say that does not work here? I do think sometimes maybe there is a little bit of a romantic angle that is kind of put onto the movie, and I feel that was a little bit trite, if I'm completely honest. It doesn't overshadow the film, but nonetheless it does feel like a little bit kind of hammy at times. And there are a couple of characters here that do seem somewhat kind of unnecessary. Teddy, who does actually have something to do in the movie, but we do have quite a lot of screen time with him. He's the kind of the suicidal screenwriter guy. And he doesn't really have a hell of a lot to do to add to the actual story until the very, very end of the movie. And to be fair, what he does could have been given to anyone else, if I'm completely honest. And also Jeff Daniels' cop. I mean, Eric Stoltz has a little bit more to do than Jeff Daniels, but Jeff Daniels' character really kind of, when we last see him in the film, it's kind of left at a point where you're thinking, well, where's this character going? What's happening here? He doesn't really, again, doesn't add a hell of a lot to the actual story itself. But to be honest with you, they're minor quibbles, and even those characters, even though I don't feel they added a lot to the story, they were still interesting to a point in their own right. Particularly kind of Jeff Daniels' character, who, you know, he actually kind of plays the hard man in a way in this film, which is kind of a little bit against type here. So overall, I've got to say, nothing too bad about this film at all. In fact, this is one of my favourite videos I had back in the days of kind of VHS, and I kind of picked it up on a blind buy, and because I was kind of quite like the kind of the Tarantino-esque movies, and I really, really enjoyed this one and watched it multiple times. And having just rewatched it for this review, I remember why I liked it so much. Overall, I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. It's a thoroughly enjoyable film. If you like the kind of the Tarantino-esque style films, it's not quite as cutting, it's not quite as sharp as those sort of films, but it's a softer, more comedic version of them, if you like. An 8 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.